Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Christian, and welcome to CatechesisCraft, where we talk Christianity and play Minecraft. This is the 50th installment in a series of videos designed as a teaching tool with the goal of being applicable to all audiences, regardless of how much, how little, or what fashion of faith that you, my wonderful viewers, might have. Today we will be discussing the life, the work, and the impact of Saint Athenagoras the Athenian. Who was Saint Athenagoras? What works, if any, survive to this day? How did Saint Athenagoras impact the body of Christian writings in his time? What can we take from his writings today? As I'm sure you can tell, we have a lot to get into, but first I would like to reiterate the fact that this channel is not focused on Christian polemics. I am not here to criticize you specifically, my wonderful viewers, for your type of Christianity, nor am I here to force any of you into believing exactly every single thing that I believe. I have faith that each of you watching this video is intelligent enough to tell the difference between objective analysis and subjective preferences, but of course, it does bear repeating. One final thing. If this or any of my previous work helps or entertains you in any way, please consider sharing this with someone who you know would benefit the most from it. Now, without further ado, let's discuss Saint Athenagoras and the first of his two writings. In our long series on the Apostolic and Ante-Nicene Church Fathers, we have discussed the great philosopher apologists of the 2nd century like Saints Justin Martyr, Quadratus, and Aristides, and detailed the core arguments of their writings, their impact, and their benefits to the Apostolic Church both then and now. Numbered among their ranks is a man who we only know existed because of his two texts, one of which was long thought to belong to St. Justin Martyr before more concrete evidence was found, and of whom none of the historians of the early Apostolic Church had made any meaningful mention of. This man, this Forgotten Apologist, was a contemporary of our previously mentioned triumvirate, and would similarly be martyred for his faith. But his words, which echo in eternity, do so often as a nameless voice in the crowd when discussed in a modern context. Saint Athenagoras of Athens, often called the Athenian, a name which is a rather timeless quality to it, is only mentioned in any reliable way in passing by one church historian, Saint Methodius of Olympus, whose 4th century apologetic text discussing resurrection quotes pieces of the Athenian's work. Outside of this, we are told nothing quantifiable about the life of this man. In his encyclopedia entry, presented by Catholic Answers, a reasonably plausible explanation is presented for this historical quirk, positing that the Athenian was often not attributed for his works as they circulated in his days. Quote, "It may be that his treatises, circulating anonymously, were for a time considered as the work of another apologist. His writings bear witness to his erudition and culture, his power as a philosopher and rhetorician, his keen appreciation of the intellectual temper of his age, and his tact and delicacy in dealing with the powerful opponents of his religion. The Apology, the date of which is fixed by internal evidence as late in 176 or 177, was not, as the title Embassy or Tresbia has suggested, an oral defense of Christianity, but a carefully written plea for justice to the Christians made by a philosopher, on philosophical grounds, to the emperors Marcus Aurelius and his son Commodus, conquerors, but above all philosophers. Regardless of the reasoning, the fact remains that were it not for the existence of his works and the discernible differences between his writing style and that of his contemporaries, we might be led to think that the man never existed, but was rather a pen name of St. Justin Martyr. Regardless of the means of their preservation, or lack of proper attribution in the earliest days of their promulgation, St. Athenagoras' open letters to emperors Marcus Aurelius and Commodus, rather than recognizing their worldly authority, bring them down to the same level as the Athenian, addressing them not just as powerful men, but as brothers in philosophy. We begin this two-part mini-series with our focus today on the elder of St. Athenagoras' two works, A Plea for Christians, which sets the stage for the tone, structure, and argumentative strengths of the Athenian. As explained in his encyclopedia entry, rather than an apologetic text itself, which others have attributed to it, Plea is clearly structured as an open letter designed to quell the lies being spread about Christianity and open the eyes of the emperors to the truth, at least to the degree that the open state-sanctioned persecution of these faithful would be ended. Chapters 1 through 3 open the arguments against the Christians as people, setting the stage for the following 30 chapters of refutation, rebukes, and reversals that the Athenian would soon provide. Chapter 1 lays out the multitude of polytheistic pagan notions that make up the great and powerful Roman Empire, and that in no other case does the empire prevent worship of any kind. The Spartans, also called Lacedaemonians in this text, venerate Agamemnon, the great Mycenaean king who led the war against Troy, as being Zeus himself. The Athenians sacrifice to Erechtheus, founder of their fair city-state, as actually being Poseidon. The Egyptians worship all manner of creatures as being the embodiment of their gods, like crocodiles, cats, and even serpents. But the Christians? Why are they kept from worship? Quote, "And to all these, both you and the laws give permission so to act, deeming, on the one hand, that to believe in no God at all is impious and wicked, and on the other, that it is necessary for each man to worship the gods he prefers, in order that through fear of the deity, men may be kept from wrongdoing. But why, for do not, like the multitude, be led astray by heresy, why is a mere name odious to you?" As the Athenian points out, it is not even the concept of Christianity itself that is feared, though it is equally hated, but the mere name of Jesus Christ brings suffering through fear. Within the Roman Empire, it was illegal for any single person to not worship a god, but the state did not care which, so long as that worship led them to keep the laws of the empire. None but Christ was feared, reviled, and ultimately persecuted, and his faithful were the least troublesome lot of them all. To this end, the Athenian marks in chapter 2 that if any Christian is truly deserving of conviction due to a crime, none of them are asking that they be given exemption because of their faith. Rather, it is the lack of any credible crimes other than their faith in Christ that marks them as deserving of death in the eyes of the empire. Quote, "If indeed anyone can convict us of a crime, be it small or great, we do not ask to be excused from punishment, but are prepared to undergo the sharpest and most merciless inflictions. But if the accusation relates merely to our name, and it is undeniable that up to the present time the stories told about us rest on nothing better than the common undiscriminating popular talk, nor has any Christian been convicted of a crime, it will devolve on you, illustrious and benevolent and most learned sovereigns, to remove by law this despiteful treatment, so that, as throughout the world, both individuals and cities partake of your beneficence, we also may feel grateful to you, exulting that we are no longer the victims of false accusation." To that end, chapter 3 enumerates the charges against the Christians as 3: atheism, cannibalism, and incest. As Saint Athenagoras will deftly display, these charges are entirely due to a lack of understanding of the Christian doctrines and the corruptions of the accusers in their explanations. Quote, "3 things are alleged against us: atheism, Thestrian feasts, Oedipian intercourse. But if these charges are true, spare no class. Proceed at once against our crimes. Destroy us root and branch with our wives and children, if any Christian is found to live like the brutes. And yet, even the brutes do not touch the flesh of their own kind, and they pair by a law of nature, and only at the regular season, not from simple wantonness. So they also recognize those from whom they receive benefits. If anyone, therefore, is more savage than the brutes, what punishment that he can endure shall be deemed adequate to such offenses?" From here, St. Athenagoras begins the dismantling of each individual charge with the rejection of the premise that Christians are atheists. Chapters 4 through 7 detail the argumentation and refutation of the idea that Christians are atheists. In the ancient conscience, If your deity was not a physical, material presence that could be seen, touched, and physically sacrificed to, it was not recognized as a god, and its followers were thought of as atheists, for they worship something that is not physically present. To this, the Athenian explains the following. Quote, "As regards, first of all, the allegation that we are atheists, for I will meet the charges one by one, that we may not be ridiculed for having no answer to give to those who make them. With reason did the Athenians adjudge Diagoras guilty of atheism, and that he not only divulged the Orphic doctrine and published the mysteries of Eleusis and of the Cabiri, and chopped up the wooden statue of Hercules to boil his turnips, but openly declared that there was no God at all. But to us, who distinguish God from matter, and teach that matter is one thing and God is another, and that they are separated by a wide interval, for that the deity is uncreated and eternal, to be beheld by the understanding and reason alone, while matter is created and perishable, is it not absurd to apply the name of atheism? Christians, and by modern extension all monotheists, believe that the Creator is above his creation, and therefore is not able to be accurately, completely, or even meaningfully represented by it. With the exception of Jesus Christ, who is God born in the flesh, who ascended to heaven and will come again, it is impossible to represent the Creator himself in any accurate way, and thus the Christians do not worship the physical as being God. Chapters 5 through 7 look at the proofs for one God. From the poets, the Athenian points to both Euripides and Sophocles in agreeing in the existence of a singular, all-powerful Creator, quoting Sophocles' own words that there is one God, in truth there is but one, who made the heavens and the broad earth beneath. On the philosophers, the Athenian proclaims the monotheism that is inherent to Platonism, which believes that whatever the all-powerful, singular, uniting force that governs all of reality is God, and that it is our duty to learn how to unite to that singular being. Even in the Stoics, of which Marcus Aurelius is famously numbered, they describe God as a singular being, even though they commit the aspects of God as being separate deity figures. To this end, Chapter 7 asks the question, why can others believe in a singular, uncreated, unphysical, unified Creator, but the Christians can't? Quote, "Since, therefore, the unity of the deity is confessed by almost all, even against their will, when they come to treat at the first principles of the universe, and we in our turn likewise assert that he who arranged the universe is God, why is it that they can say and write with impunity what they please concerning the deity, but that against us a law lies in force, though we are able to demonstrate what we apprehend and justly believe, namely that there is one God, with proofs and reason accordant with truth?" Almost all of the rest of the text, chapters 8 through 30, detail in the most precise ways exactly why monotheism is not only the opposite of atheism, but is also objectively true as a concept. Chapters 8 and 9 describe the absurdity of atheism and the proof through the prophets and their confrontations with polytheistic priesthoods that God is one, not many. Chapters 10 through 12 describe, in the middle of the 2nd century, that Christians believe in the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and that these three persons are one God. Not only this, but the Athenian details how Christians are morally and religiously prohibited from contradicting this, and therefore also prohibited from the worship of any polytheistic creations. Because of this, the Athenian details the absurdity of Christians being called atheists. Not only do they not believe in the absence of God, they are the most strict monotheists in existence, believing not only that other gods aren't actually gods, but that they are in fact demonic, evil forces. Chapters 13 through 15 discuss why Christians do not offer animal sacrifices to God. Not even detailing the Jewish heritage of Christianity, as Judaism has become an almost extinct practice by the time of Emperor Marcus Aurelius, Saint Athenagoras notes that the creator of all things in existence has no use for animal sacrifice. He need not eat, He need not satisfy any mortal cravings, and he asks for none. What Christ clearly identifies as sacrifice in the New Covenant, the covenant in his body and blood, is the sacrifice of the Eucharist, a singular, eternal sacrifice that is joined in by every faithful adherent of the Apostolic Church perpetually until the end of time. It is, for us today, a bloodless sacrifice initiated by the blood and body of Christ. It is not animals, but worship that God requests, and that worship is at the altar of salvation. Chapters 16 through 20 answer the question of the lack of any physical statues of God. As a reminder, in a polytheistic context, the statue doesn't represent or point toward God, as it does in the case of Christianity, but rather the statue is God. When the polytheist worships at the altar of Zeus, Zeus is the statue in the temple. Apollo is the sun, and so on and so forth. Now, for this particular reason, statues of all sorts were made, even human body parts, so that you could pray to the god of your big toe if you broke it, or the god of your lungs if you had a cough. For Christians, statues of the saints and of Christ himself are reminders of our Creator and his most heroic and holy servants. The statue of the Blessed Mother isn't her physical form, it is a reminder of who she is and what she has done in service of the one true God. Like our modern statues of national heroes, the statues of saints are seen as heroes of the faith, and we are called to live up to the standard that they upheld in their lives. Chapter 16 explains the difference between worshiping an immaterial creator and worshiping the universe. Simply put, the universe is a creation, it's not the creator. To worship the universe, even in the abstract sense, is to worship the whole of created things altogether, and the whole of created things altogether is not God. God, while intangible and invisible in purely physical terms, exists above the creation and therefore outside of the universe. In chapters 17 and 18 express that the polytheistic gods are not only not God, but are themselves creations of the great poets to explain natural phenomena, and therefore are not creators but objects of creation. Chapter 19 discusses the agreement between philosophers and poets on this matter, that these images and stories of the pagan deities cannot be God, as they themselves were created. On the moral argument for the falsehood of pagan gods, chapters 20 through 23 discuss the impurities, illogical symbolism, and most prominent philosophical thought of the matter of the pagan deities. Chapter 20 and 21 detail the sexual immorality and impurity of the pagan gods as incestuous, abusive, and extremely corrupting forces whose actions are clearly stated as evil, but whose interpreters attempt to explain these evil details away as being symbolical acts of incest or abuse or what have you, as an image to give us a greater concept, however thin that argument may be. Finally, chapter 23 makes clear that the most impactful philosopher of the Greeks, Plato, clearly recognized the impossibility of anything other than a singular entity to be God. Quote, "This is shown by Plato himself. Not being able to designate him by another title that should be suitable, he availed himself of the popular name, not as peculiar to God, but for distinctness, because it is not possible to discourse of God to all men as fully as one might." And he adds at the same time the epithet great, so as to distinguish the heavenly from the earthly, the uncreated from the created, who is younger than heaven and earth, and younger than all the Cretans who stole him away, that he might not be killed by his father. Chapter 24 through 30 are the home stretch for the argument against atheism, as St. Athenagoras describes various other connected topics in the discussion of the one God. In reference to angels and giants, chapter 24 explains that these beings, powerful as they are still created creatures, ultimately subject to a singular, higher entity that created them. Both of these creatures have chosen to fall away from worshipping the one true God and have been given power over the physical world to do with as they please. This power only enhances their disobedience to God. Quote, These angels, then, who have fallen from heaven and haunt the air and the earth, and are no longer able to rise to heavenly things, and the souls of the giants, which are the demons who wander about the world, perform actions similar. The one, that is demons, to the natures they have received. The other, that is the angels, to the appetites they have indulged. But the prince of matter, as may be seen merely from what transpires, exercises a control and management contrary to the good that is in God. Chapter 25 continues on to explain that these demons and fallen angels have led astray the philosophers in service of themselves in the belief that there is no such thing as divine providence. For if divine providence exists, so too does a proper way of attaining, utilizing, and worshiping the giver of said providence. Chapter 26 and 27 describe how the demons lure mankind to the worship of physical things as being gods. It serves the purposes of the demons to have whole nations of people whose worship is turned away from the one true God, whose goals are the salvation of all by the unity and obedience to him and his church, and turned towards the worship of the demonic forces, whose goals are the domination and subjugation of the whole of creation. Quote, "When, too, a tender and susceptible soul, which has no knowledge or experience of sounder doctrines, and is unaccustomed to contemplate truth, and to consider thoughtfully the Father and Maker of all things, gets impressed with false opinions respecting itself, then the demons who hover about matter, greedy of sacrificial odors and the blood of victims, and ever ready to lead men into error, avail themselves of these delusive movements of the souls of the multiple, and, taking possession of their thoughts, cause to flow into the mind empty visions, as if coming from the idols and the statues, and when, too, a soul itself, as being immortal, moves comfortably to reason, either predicting the future or healing the present, the demons claim the glory for themselves." Now, the final 3 chapters on the argument against atheism and polytheism, chapters 28 through 30, describe what the Romans call barbarians, which would be the Germanic, Celtic, Norse, and otherwise unconquered peoples of Northern and Western Europe, as the heathens, and their form of polytheistic worship as being the worship of men who once roamed the earth. In fact, Saint Athenagoras makes the same claim about the so-called civilized peoples in chapter 28 as well. He details how the crossover between Greeks and Egyptians, how the Egyptians claim that their gods actually roamed the earth, had children, and those children would form the dynasties of Egypt. He details how the Greeks, upon meeting the Egyptians, gave names to these gods and their children, and how these formed the myths of their peoples. Chapter 29 reinforces the claims through the poets themselves as to the mortal nature of their mythic polytheistic deities. Quote, "Either therefore they were gods and did not hanker after gold, O gold, the fairest prize to mortal men, which neither mother equals in delight, nor children dear, for the deity is in want of naught, and is superior to carnal desire, nor did they die, or, having been born men, they were wicked by reason of ignorance, and overcome by love of money." Chapter 30 answers the question of, if these deities are mortal men, why have these men been called deities? Simply stated, it is beneficial for these men of great and powerful stature to claim godhood. For one so successful on the battlefield, or wise in the ways of the world, or clever in their implementations and technologies, the claims of deity raise their achievements to standards to be worshipped, not achieved. In the final paragraphs of chapter 30, Saint Athenagoras closes the argument of atheism with the following. Quote, "Though you believe, O Callimachus, in the nativity of Zeus, you do not believe in his sepulchre, and whilst you think to obscure the truth, you in fact proclaim him dead, even to those who are ignorant. And if you see the cave, you call to mind the childbirth of Rhea. But when you see the coffin, you throw a shadow over his death, not considering that the unbegotten God alone is eternal. For either the tales told by the multitudes and the poets about gods are unworthy of credit, and the reverence shown them is superfluous, for those do not exist, the tales concerning whom are untrue, or if the births, the amours, the murders, the thefts, the castrations, the thunderbolts are true, They no longer exist, having ceased to be since they were born, having previously had no being. And on what principle must we believe some things and disbelieve others, when the poets have written their stories in order to gain greater veneration for them? For surely those through whom they have got to be considered gods, and who have striven to represent their deeds as worthy of reverence, cannot have invented their sufferings. That, therefore, we are not atheists, acknowledging as we do God, the maker of the universe, and his logos, has been proved according to my ability, if not according to the importance of the subject. Chapters 31 through 35 briefly discuss and overturn the other charges brought against the Christians, namely that of cannibalism and incest as outlined in chapter 31. On the topic of incest, chapters 32 through 34 rebuke the very act of incest and reflect these charges on the very pagan gods themselves. In chapter 32, Saint Athenagoras details that deeply incestuous gods of the Greeks and the Romans, how Zeus took his own mother and his daughter to bear children, and his own sister as his wife. In this regard, Christians are entirely blameless. The Athenian explains that Christians calling each other brothers and sisters, even when married, are as brothers and sisters in their shared faith, not in their shared genes. He details how lusts of all kind, especially for one's own kin, are detestable in the sacred scriptures. Quote, "On behalf of those, then, to whom we apply the names of brothers and sisters, and other designations of relationship, we exercise the greatest care that their bodies should remain undefiled and uncorrupted. For the Logos again says unto us, if anyone kiss a second time because it has given him pleasure, he sins, adding, therefore the kiss, or rather the salutation, should be given with the greatest care, since, if there be mixed within the least defilement of thought, it excludes us from eternal life." Chapters 33 and 34 discuss the Christian image of marriage, that of one man and one wife, united for eternity in the sacrament of matrimony, which you can learn more about in our video. Saint Athenagoras provides details that proves the ancient place of this sacrament of matrimony and its doctrines in regards to monogamous marriage, marital relations, procreation, virginity, chastity, and bigamy, which is the practice of a second marriage following the divorce or death of the first spouse. Even the very act of impure thoughts in or outside of the context of marriage are prohibited in the ancient practices of the Apostolic Church. Quote, "Therefore, having the hope of eternal life, we despise the things of this life, even to the pleasures of the soul, each of us reckoning her his wife, whom he has married according to the laws laid down by us, and that only for the purpose of having children. For as the husbandman throwing seed into the ground awaits the harvest, not sowing more upon it, so to us the procreation of children is the measure of our indulgence in appetite. Nay, you would find many among us, both men and women, growing old unmarried, in hope of living in closer communion with God." In fact, to this end, the Athenian details in chapter 34 how the Christians are morally superior to their pagan neighbors. It is the pagans, the heathens, and the accusers who promote and practice polyamory, polygamy, bigamy, adultery, sodomy, and all manner of sexual immorality of even the most detestable sort. In this, Saint Athenagoras explains that it is because of the indulgence of these habits that the sexually immoral rebuke the morality of the Christians. If these few Christians refuse to participate or even accept these practices of the accusers, the practitioners themselves are rejected. Quote, "But though such is our character, oh, why should I speak of things unfit to be uttered? The things said to us are an example of the proverb, the harlot reproves the chaste. For those who have set up a market for fornication, and established infamous resorts for the young for every kind of vile pleasure, who do not abstain even from males, males with males committing shocking abominations, outraging all the noblest and comeliest bodies in all sorts of ways, so dishonoring the fair workmanship of God, for beauty on earth is not self-made, but sent hither and by the hand and will of God. These men, I say, revile us for the very things which they are conscious of themselves and ascribe to their own gods, boasting of them as noble deeds and worthy of gods." These adulterers and pederasts defame the eunuchs and the once married, while they themselves live like fishes, for they gulp down whatever fails in their way, and the stronger chases the weaker, and in fact this is to feed upon the human flesh, and to do violence in contravention of the very laws which you and your ancestors, with due care for all that is fair and right, have enacted, so that not even the governors of the provinces sent by you suffice for the hearing of the complaints against these, to whom it even is not lawful, when they are struck, not to offer themselves for more blows, nor when defamed not to bless. For it is not enough to be just, and justice is to return like for like, but it is incumbent on us to be good and patient of evil. Moving to chapter 35, St. Athenagoras disproves the existence of cannibalism among the Christians in very short order. Firstly, he states that to call Christians cannibals is to call them murderers, for flesh cannot be eaten of a living creature. If you are therefore calling Christians murderers, you are lying about Christians, as even their enemies recognize their doctrine of peace. Quote, "What man of sound mind, therefore, will affirm, while such is our character, that we are murderers? For we cannot eat human flesh till we have killed someone. The former charge, therefore, being false, if anyone should ask them in regard to the second, whether they have seen what they assert, not one of them would be so barefaced as to say that he had. And yet we have slaves, some more and some fewer, by whom we could not help being seen. But even these, not one has been found to invent even such things against us. For when they know we cannot endure even to see a man put to death, though justly, who of them can accuse us of murder or cannibalism?" He details further how all manner of murder, whether the death of a gladiator in battle, or that of the abortion of a child in the womb, are equally murderous in nature, action, and result, all of which the person committing the act of murder will be accountable to God for in their judgment. If the Christians recognize these things equally as murderous, how can one call them cannibals? Quote, "Who does not reckon among the things of great interests the contests of gladiators and wild beasts, especially those which are given by you? But we, deeming that to see a man put to death is much the same as killing him, have abjured such spectacles. How then, when we do not even look on, lest we should contract guilt and pollution, can we put people to death? And when we say that those women who use drugs to bring on abortion commit murder, and will have to give an account to God for the abortion, on what principle should we commit murder? For it does not belong to the same person to regard the very fetus in the womb as a created being, and therefore an object of God's care, and when it has passed into life, to kill it, and not to expose an infant, because those who expose them are chargeable with child murder, and on the other hand when it has been reared, to destroy it. But we are in all things always alike and the same, submitting ourselves to reason and not ruling over it." In this chapter, not only has St. Athenagoras provided ample evidence against the claims of his persecutors, but provided one of the earliest extra-biblical accounts of the Apostolic Church having an extremely clear anti-abortion stance. As we discussed in our video on the Didache, the first catechetical text in Christian history and a contemporary text of many of the books of the Bible, abortion has always been recognized within Christianity, even from the earliest days of the Apostolic Church, as an objectively evil, indefensibly immoral action that is explicitly prohibited by God. As a final proof against cannibalism, St. Athenagoras previews his arguments for the resurrection, the fullness of which we will cover next week, in chapter 36. If Christians believe in the bodily resurrection of the faithful at the end of days, how could they eat the bodies of their brethren? If they were cannibals, then the body is purely food, a perishable, temporary, and permanently empty vessel after death, and therefore an equally valid source of sustenance as that of a cow, or the fruits of the trees, or bread. But if the bodily resurrection is true, and Christians are commanded to believe so, then the bodies of the brothers and sisters who have fallen asleep are not to be consumed, nor that of any human. In the final words of today's readings, St. Athenagoras pleads one last time for the end of the persecution of the Christians. Not only are they not atheists, they are the most strict monotheists. Not only are they not incestuous, they're the most strict monogamists. Not only are they not cannibals, the doctrine of the resurrection prohibits the defilement of the dead in any manner. In the words of the Athenian, Christians are the most upstanding of the many and varied citizens of the vast Roman Empire, and wish only to be treated as such. Quote, "And now do you, who are entirely in everything by nature and by education, upright and moderate and benevolent and worthy of your rule, now that I have disposed of the several accusations and proved that we are pious and gentle and temperate in spirit, bend your royal head in approval. For who are more deserving to obtain the things they ask than those who, like us, pray for your government, that you may, as is most equitable, receive the kingdom, son from father, and that your empire may receive increase and addition, all men becoming subject to your sway. And this is also for our advantage, that we may lead a peaceable and quiet life, and may ourselves readily perform all that is commanded of us." No matter what denomination or lack thereof that you ascribe to, I hope that this has been educational and has given you, my wonderful viewers, a primer on Saint Athenagoras and the first of his two writings pleading for the end of Christian persecution in his days. As always, I highly suggest that if you are interested in a deeper understanding of a specific denomination's doctrine, the best place to go will always be an actual pastor, priest, or well-lettered theologian in that tradition. I am merely a layman, doing the very best that I can with the gifts that God has given me, and hopefully illuminating the path along the way for all of you. Thank you all so much for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, if you have found it informative or educational in any way, please consider leaving a like, comment what you gained most from it, and of course please share this or any of my previous work with those who you believe would benefit the most from it. If you are interested in more videos like this, good news! We wrap up this two-part mini-series on the works of Saint Athenagoras next week and have more content well on its way, so please make sure to subscribe and turn on your notifications for future releases. This has been the 50th installment in what I pray will be a long and fruitful series, taking biblical topics and concepts large and small and forming them into simple, digestible bites with some gameplay in the back because, let's face it, it's nice to have something on screen while you're learning. Leave a comment if you'd like a certain topic to be covered, as I do read as many comments as I can on these videos, and it's always good to know what my audience wants to see. If you would like the opportunity for your questions to be read out in a video, please send your Q&A questions to our email, CatechesisCraft@gmail.com. I will occasionally be posting Q&A videos where I answer directly the questions that you guys have about Christianity. There is nothing off the table, but I cannot guarantee that every single question will be answered in every single one of these kinds of videos. Even still, my goal is to make this an open resource of simple, straightforward, and clear answers that accurately represent the beliefs of Christians across time. If you'd like to pick up a Bible for yourself, which, as I'm sure you can tell, is pretty central to our work here, please consider checking out our video on Bible translations and using the links below that video for your choice. Each product linked in the description of that video utilizes Amazon affiliate links, and every purchase using those links costs absolutely nothing extra for you, but provides us here at CatechesisCraft with a small percentage to help fund our work. You can also become a supporter on Locals for just $10 a month and get access to supplementary articles, blog posts, and at some point, live streams and access to a Minecraft server, both of which are coming soon in the biblical sense. But all of that is completely optional. I'm excited to be on this journey with all of you, and I'm extremely thankful for the fact that you chose to watch this video. We are rapidly approaching our 1-year anniversary, so I hope you all have a great rest of your day, whenever you happen to be watching this. God bless, and I'll see you all next time.